Welcome back to Baking Savvy. I'm Christy, and today I will be showing you how you can use a Cricut machine to make customized edible designs out of fondant. In this tutorial, I will show you how to create your own food-safe mat, the adjustments you need to make on your Cricut machine, as well as how to prep your fondant for cutting. The first thing you're going to want to do is take your Cricut mat and peel off the protective covering. I bought this mat at the Dollar Tree. Now, the mat has a rough side and a shiny side. You want to make sure that the shiny side is facing toward you when you're placing it on your Cricut mat. These chopping mats are 11 by 14 inches. The Cricut mat, as you know, is a 12 by 12. You're going to want to place the chopping mat sideways, so it's going to be 14 inches wide across to 11 inches in length. Begin by tracing the outer portions of the Cricut mat onto your chopping mat using a Sharpie and a ruler. Next, you're going to space out 1 inch all the way across lengthwise. Once you have finished going from top to bottom, turn your mat sideways and start drawing your lines horizontally. Skip the first row as well as the bottom row when doing these lines. Continue drawing the rest of your grid. Now, the reason we skip the first row and the bottom row is because when we place the mat in the Cricut machine, the rollers will actually go over these parts of the mat, and if you have fondant in these areas, they will get caught inside the machine. I prefer to shade in these areas as a reference to remind myself not to cover fondant in these areas of the mat. Number your mat from 1 to 12 on the top portion. Then, do the same on the side portion, except here you are going to number 1 through 10. Keep in mind that you need to number them backwards. Remember that because our cutting mat measures 11 by 14, we will not have the 12 inches all the way around. The extra portion of the chopping mat can be cut using an X-Acto knife or scissors, whichever you prefer. Here, I am scoring the mat with an X-Acto knife. Then, I remove the chopping mat from the Cricut mat and bend the end in half until it breaks off clean. Now, because you will be using this chopping mat and washing it for future uses, the Sharpie will eventually rub off. To avoid this, you're going to want to seal the back of the mat with contact paper. You can also use the Cricut transfer paper for this. When placing your paper down on your mat, avoid lifting it to move it around. If you do, you run the risk of lifting up the Sharpie markings and throwing off your grid. Make sure that it is completely covering the mat from end to end and cut off any extra paper. Now let's move on to preparing your Cricut machine. Your machine has 4 white rollers running along the metal gear. These are easily movable by just taking them and moving them over to the side. Now, to get to one of these rollers, you're going to want to turn on the machine, and when the housing is running to the left, quickly take the roller and just slide it over. Here, I am using a Cricut cake blade. Now, because the Cricut cake blade is longer in length, I am positioning the housing just about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch higher. More information can be found on my website on using other Cricut blades such as the deep point blade. Next, we will need to prepare our images. For this, we are using the Cricut Design Space. Select your desired design. When using the Cricut machine, it's best that the images be at least 1.5 inches wide to get perfect cuts. Be sure that when you upload a design that it is set up to cut mode by selecting No Fill in the drop-down box. Next, you're going to hit the Make It button and continue. Now, remember when I told you that we needed to save that extra inch off both sides of the mat? When you go to make your designs, you're going to shift them over to begin at the 1 inch mark instead of the 0 inch mark. Now, let's create your customized cutting settings. To do this, go to the Browse All Materials tab and click on Materials Settings. Here you will see all the different preset materials with their corresponding cutting pressures and blade choices. You are going to scroll down to the bottom and click on Add New Material. Create a settings name. In this case, I chose Fondant Settings and click Save. Now you're going to want to set your pressure point as well as have the multi-cut option selected as off and define the blade that you're going to want to use. In this case, we're going to choose the deep point blade, and the pressure point we're going to set it to 170. You can set this by either using the slider and moving it left to right, or you can use the plus and minus signs to adjust the pressure point. Be sure to save your custom settings. You will see your settings in the Materials section. Double check the settings are correct by clicking Edit and then click Done when you're finished. To save your custom fondant settings under your Favorites tab, you're going to want to go back into the Browse All Materials link and scroll all the way down to where it says My Materials. Once you have found it, simply click on the star. If you want to save other types of materials, you just add them by clicking on the star. Then go to your Favorites tab, click on your settings, and click Done. Now go to the drop-down box under the Materials settings, and your custom setting is ready to go. Now let's go back and get your fondant ready. You're going to want to begin by taking a little bit of vegetable shortening and lightly brushing it on top of your custom mat. Now be sure not to get any of the shortening onto the shaded areas, for you will not place fondant in these areas. Once your mat is ready, we're going to begin kneading your fondant. We want it to be pliable for when we go to roll it out. I like to use a wooden rolling pin when rolling out the fondant. Roll your fondant out to the dimensions that correspond to your design as thinly as possible. It should be about 1/8 of an inch. Then place the fondant onto your chopping mat and lightly press it down. Roll out your fondant again on top of the mat. This will help your fondant adhere to the shortening. You will also notice that the fondant has stretched out a little bit further, and you can just simply use a knife and trim the edges. If you find that the fondant is still a little bit too thick, you can continue to roll and trim as needed. Now we are ready to begin using our Cricut machine. With your custom settings already set, load the mat into the machine. Click on the up and down arrow on the machine to load the mat, and then click on the Cricut symbol for the machine to start cutting out your design. Once the Cricut has finished cutting out your designs, unload the mat and make sure that all of the design has been cut cleanly. Before weeding out the fondant, we want to lightly go over the edges to smooth out any rigid areas. Then take the upper corner and begin to remove the fondant. Do this slowly to make sure you are not pulling up certain areas that are hard to reach. Using a pick tool, get to those hard to reach areas and remove the extra fondant. For this video, I show you how to remove the fondant design from the mat using a small knife to remove it and place it on a separate surface that has been dusted with powdered sugar and left to dry. However, I found it easier to freeze the design for 5 minutes and then remove it from the mat using the same procedure. Having the design harden up in the freezer made it easier to remove and transfer over to finish drying. I will repeat this process with yellow fondant that has a slightly different design. It will trace out the border and then go back inside and cut out the inner borders of the letters. Now for this type of design, I want to weed out the inside parts of the letters first and then smooth out the border. Again, take the corner and slightly pull back the fondant to remove it. Repeat the same process as the blue fondant piece on removing the design from the mat and allowing it to dry. Then, join the two parts together by using a little bit of edible glue. This nameplate was used for a Pokemon-themed birthday cake. And there you have it. The possibilities are quite endless now that you know how to use your Cricut machine with fondant. Want to see more videos like this and more? Then subscribe to my YouTube channel and be sure to hit that notification bell to be the first to know when I post new videos and updates. You can also follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter to get the latest tips, tricks, and behind-the-scenes footage. As always, guys, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more videos.